independent relations can, at some point or other, get embedded in such a way as to become metabolic. And when they become metabolic, the rules of their engagement changes drastically. Now, the simple answer to the example of this would be the following. Somebody has a headache or is feeling very badly and takes a painkiller. And they don't feel good next day either, so they take a painkiller a day. This is an independent relation. So the person is feeling sick, there's painkillers over there's nothing puts them together and says that they have a metabolic relation. But you can see quickly that at a certain point, there will be opioid addiction, in which case there starts to be a metabolic relation emerging out of the independent relation. There was painkillers and there was somebody with a pain, independent. But then after a while it became habitual, and that therefore they became part and parcel of each other. That the addict could not exist without the opioid. And of course, the production of opioids depended very much on the existence of addiction, in which case we find all of this business going on of the pharmaceutical companies actually peddling and creating this addictive relation. When capital starts off, it starts off as something that is totally independent. It's somebody has some money and they kind of go out in the marketplace and they hire some laborers and they got some means of production and they make something. And they make something for a week and then they sell it and then they go home and they forget all about it. This is independent relation, okay? But then what happens is that at a certain point, somebody goes into the market and buys means of production and labor power and creates a commodity and monetizes that commodity and gets a profit and says, okay, well, I think I want to go through this again and get some more profit because, more profit is more wealth and power. And so after a bit, and as Marx kind of says, the definition of capital is that point at which, not when we first take money and go off and buy the things, but when there is a need and an urge, if you like, an addiction, if you like, put it that way, of actually taking the surplus value which you created through the production process and the profit which you gained and reinserting it back in so that you start to get the circulation of capital. And the result is the circulation of capital crystallizes out as a metabolic relation. Now, what this does historically is this. It says that all kinds of things were going on in society, and people were producing things, and there was some wage labor, and there was like commodity trades and things like that, and so on. It was all going on. But that capital is about value in motion, and it's about the circulation of capital, and that circulation process is self-replicating. That is, it becomes a metabolic relation, and there's a metabolic relation with nature, because the labor process is about taking labor and putting that labor to work to transform use values which exist in nature into something which is a commodity which is then going to be useful and going to be sold onto some other person. So this is the world which we start to see emerging. So that Marx really talks about pre-capitalism as a process emerging out of independent relations and the gradual construction of a metabolic relation, which is very analogous to the addiction that we talked about of opioids, and that therefore the capitalist is now engaged in such a way that they cannot do anything other than take their profit and bring it back in and start to create even more value, more surplus value. So you start to get into what Marx called the spiral form, as opposed to simply a circulation process. If we want to think about the conversion of a capitalist system into a socialist system, then we've got to be able to intervene in the metabolic relation. We've got to find a way of breaking apart a lot of that metabolic connectivity, and we've got to think about ways of perhaps rendering independent certain elements within the construction process. And that is what one of the features of Marx's theory is about, is to how to take the pieces, break them from their metabolic connection, and start to actually then create an alternative world in which we would still continue to actually think about the relationality between the different elements